talks. They just basically loop, really useful for like NPCs in the background of your game or something like that. I'm going to go ahead and choose move, and there's a basic male run. Okay, I'm going to click on that, and we're going to take a look at the character from the side. So right about here, zoom out slightly, and I'm going to go ahead and preview that by clicking the preview button and pressing the space key. And here's our run. Now, maybe, again, a little bit choppy for you guys as we're broadcasting, but hopefully it's not too choppy. Hopefully it's fairly smooth. Now, I'm just going to mess around slightly with these sliders here. So currently we have slider control selected, okay? And we have a couple of options here for exaggeration and speed. I'm just going to pump up the exaggeration to like 200, and you can see that we have a bit of a problem there. Like his arms are going through his chest mesh, and that's something that we don't want. We can take the exaggeration down to 0, and he just kind of like does a little bit of a shuffle like this, okay? So, you can do like a weird kind of looking shuffle like that. I'm going to tweak the exaggeration up slightly, maybe just to 120. Okay, and I'll talk about how you can do the upper and lower exaggeration separately when we get into the motion modify. Okay, and then in addition to that main slider, those two main sliders, we have these ones over here. We have the lower hips, raise hips. We can lower them like this if we want them to be like a limbo running or something like that. Probably not, so we're just going to keep that normal. He is going to be running at quite a fast pace, so we're going to have him lean forward a little bit, okay, like this. The shoulders don't really matter in this particular run, so we're just going to keep those right where they are. And we're going to have him slouch as well, okay? Slouching will have him kind of lean forward even further. And the elbows we don't have to worry about. In this case, we're not going to worry about raising them or putting them out. We do want to make the stride slightly slightly longer. Okay, not too long, because if it's too long, you'll notice some weird stuff happening with the feet. Probably about 70%. And you can see now it looks like we've changed that kind of jogging run to a more faster pace looking run, more dynamic. And to make it additionally more dynamic, we can adjust the bouncing hips. We can make it, the hips bounce more, so he's bouncing up and down a lot more as he's running. That's just basically making the hip bone go up and down further as he's taking each step. I like to sway the hips a little bit, okay, more from side to side. The loose neck is good for a very fast, exaggerated run. Let's take a look at it from the front here. So you can see it looks like he's really pounding the pavement and going at a fairly fast pace. So with just those few sliders, you can really adjust that. You can really make it seem a lot more dynamic. You have to sway more like this. Okay, we don't want that too exaggerated, but I think that'll be okay right there. Okay, so it looks like he's really running pretty fast. Okay, so once we're done that, we can go ahead and press space to stop our preview, and then we can click on the record button and press the space to record. So I'm just going to record like maybe 10 steps, okay? So press space, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, good enough. Okay, so we took 10 steps just like that. Now, that's all I'm going to do with the motion puppet panel here. We can mask out certain things, but I'll talk about that in other tutorials or webinars. If you want to learn more about masking, I can talk about that in the Q&A. But we'll close that down for now, and we're going to press F3 to go into our timeline. Okay, and I'm going to open up the timeline a little bit here. So we have Zane's track open, and you can see we hold Alt and scroll our mouse button. We can zoom out, and you can see here we have this one puppet clip at 1 time speed, linear, time warp linear. Okay, so what's happening here is that we just have this run like this. And if we want, we can right click on this and we can go up to the modify option, okay? So this is the motion modify tool, and this allows us to further modify, post recording, further modify our run, okay? So, and you can see here we have lower and upper exaggeration separate. And with the base pose, we're gonna use the default pose here, okay? And on the part modify, you can, again, adjust each one of the parts further. So we have the same options here. There's slider mode for stand mode, pose correction, or move mode. Okay, in move mode, there's a couple more options down here. Stiff arm and stiff elbow. Okay, so if we just go ahead and preview, press space, this is our preview right here. Okay, and then we can, it'll just keep looping back and forth. We can have our neck move forward like this, so we can have his neck further down. Let me just zoom in so we can see that a little bit better. So neck forward and neck back. Okay, this is one that I like to use, especially if he's running with reckless abandon. Have him lean forward even further, and slouch even further. Okay, but generally I think we're going to be okay. I'm going to just bounce the hips a bit more. I like those bouncy hips, and then we can just do the lower and upper exaggeration separately. So if we wanted to exaggerate the upper even further, we can do that. You can see he's like really going at it right there. And we can do the lower exaggeration separately as well. Okay. So that's just the motion modify panel. So after you've recorded, if you want to modify it further, this is one way that you can do so. Okay. And I think we're looking okay right there. Let's just go ahead and press OK. That'll modify that motion for us. Okay. It'll be in the same clip. And there's one final thing that I want to do here. I want to just tweak it slightly. I want to make sure, because when he's running, if I scroll through my mouse or scroll through the timeline right here, I kind of find that the arms are a little bit too close to the body. Okay, so in this pose right here, what I want to do is I want to make the arms a little bit further away from the body. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to, it doesn't really matter which frame, but I'm going to go to frame 1 here. And I'm going to just choose the Edit Motion Layer tool. And I'm going to take his arm, his elbow right here, and use the E hotkey to rotate it slightly like this. And just slightly over here as well. So now it's going to be further away from his body a little bit. Take the other arm and do the same here. The other elbow, rather. Do the same, just like that. And maybe it further down. And I find they're kind of too bent as well. So I'm just going to relax them a little bit. More like this. So you can see they're very bent. So I'm going to just kind of slightly bring them down. Like this as well. Okay, and now our run, I think, will be slightly better tweaked. And I can also take the head. If that head is too far down, I can kind of bring it up slightly like this. And all these modifications I'm making, because it's at frame 1, it's going to basically last throughout the entire duration of this clip. Okay, so if I scrub through my timeline, there you go. It looks a little bit better because his arms aren't as bent close to his body, and his head is just like, he's really just, this pose, for example, is a great running pose, sprinting forward and stuff. So, that's kind of the effect that we wanted to achieve, and I think we've achieved it. So you can, of course, use the motion modify tool as well as the edit motion layer tool to achieve that. Okay, so the next item of business is we're going to go ahead and have him move forward. So this requires a transform position. So let's go ahead and close down the timeline. Well, actually, we're going to keep the timeline open for now, for most of this, until the animation is complete. Let's just close down our project track, though, so we can have a bit more space. And what I'm going to do is you can press the G hotkey. If you press the G hotkey, that gives you a direct overhead view of your character. You can zoom out like this. Since he's moving forward, I'm just going to go ahead and press the W hotkey with the character selected, and that's going to bring up our movement gizmo. Now it's going to add a keyframe in the transform track, which is this one right here. So if I move forward to the very end of my motion clip, right about here, I'm going to go ahead and just click on the green arrow and move him forward to about here. Okay. And if we press the S hotkey or the A hotkey, S or A, it'll give you different camera positions on the character. I'm going to go with the A. So he's running left to right here. And let's zoom out slightly here. And let's just test this a little bit. So you can see if we go back to frame 1 here, let's try and zoom out not too far. So we're in the buildings. About this distance should be okay. Back to frame 1. Now, one difference you may notice is that at the beginning, he'll kind of just run in place. And this is because we've made a change with iClone 7.2 from previous versions, where by default, any transition between two keyframes, in this case, the two transform keyframes, is going to be ease in and ease out. So basically what he's doing with the run is he's easing in and easing out as he approaches his destination. Okay, so to fix that, what we can do is right-click on the second keyframe and select the transition curve presets. And you can see the default, it's sort of an ease in, ease out curve right there. We're just going to change that to a linear curve. Okay, and when we change it to a linear curve, okay, the speed looks a bit better. Okay, let's go ahead and close that down. So now we have a linear curve between point A and point B. Now I think the running looks okay, not too bad. Again, if you want to change the speed of the run, the easiest way to do that in this case, again, you can press Tab and Shift Tab to toggle between the two keyframes. So Tab will go to the next keyframe, and Shift Tab will go to the previous keyframe. In this case, there's only two keyframes. So if you wanted him to look like he's if he's kind of sliding too much, you probably want to bring the position a little bit further back, like this. And then if we play back, there you go. Okay. But I think we're okay. We don't have to spend too much time on that. It's a basic concept. I think most of you are familiar with that kind of stuff, changing transform position. And again, if you have any questions, you can always feel free to ask me in the Q&A session. All right. And let's go back to the last transform keyframe. And what we need to do is we need to add in a vehicle for Zane to smash into. So let's go to our set tab up here, back to the main folder. And there should be a props folder here and a PVR folder at the very beginning. And I'm just going to go ahead into this freebie folder. These are freebies that come with iClone 7. And under the Arena Fox folder, there's a couple of cool, classic, old-looking rusty cars. And I'm going to just bring rusty car A in here. We'll just throw it into our scene. There we go. And I'm going to bring the car a little bit over to the left, or to our right, to the car's left there. Maybe that'll be a good distance right there. And you notice that since we did that movement at frame 232, what's going to happen, it's going to add a transform keyframe, and that car will be slightly moving throughout the duration of our project. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're aware where you're moving that car, what frame or any object. And a good way to just, if you want to keep this position for the entire duration of the project, just right-click the car and select Remove Object Animation. And that will just maintain that same position for the entire time. Okay, so let's go ahead and select Zane one more time and go to his last frame before he gets blown to bits here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a 3-point transform / motion layer edit, okay, to have him smash against the car. I'm going to keep it fairly simple here. And so, okay, what we're going to do is just go ahead and bring up our timeline a little bit. And we're going to move this over to maybe about frame 260. It doesn't really matter. We can modify the timing a little bit later. And what I'm going to do is we're going to have him being blown against the car. So we're just going to move his transform position just like this to the side. We're going to use the E hotkey to rotate him and just basically, put him into this kind of position right here and right there. Okay, just a general position where he's kind of about to basically smash into the car. So what we've done here now is we have from here to here, he's just kind of smashing against the car. If we play it back, okay, it's a little bit slow, but again, like I mentioned, we'll be able to adjust the timing of all these keyframes a little bit later. Okay, so at frame 2, or at the second point here, which is this frame 260, we're also going to add a motion layer key, okay? So we're going to go to our Edit Motion Layer tool one more time. And I'm going to go into my motion subtracks here and just scroll it down. And you can see we have the motion layer track right here. So what I want to do is I want to double click in that motion layer track right there. Should add a keyframe. Maybe not. If it doesn't, you can just go ahead and press reset. Oh, not reset. That's the wrong one. Control Z. Should be able to add a motion layer keyframe here. Anyways, we'll just go ahead and select default. Not sure why it's doing that. Maybe we need to, let's go to this frame here. We're going to cheat. Okay, this might be a little bit of a bug. We're going to go to the last frame of our clip here, and I'm just going to double click in the motion layer track there, and that's going to add a keyframe. You can see that little thing right there. Okay, so I'm just going to click and drag this, copy it maybe. We should be able to paste it here. Okay, a little bit of a workaround, hopefully. And okay, I'm just going to go ahead and just go ahead to modifying the character's position anyways. It'll add the keyframe. We don't need to add a default keyframe. So what I'm going to do is unlock the feet. So unlock, so we can actually move these feet separately, just like this. Okay, and there you go. It finally adds one. Okay, now we can press, reset or whatever we want. But okay, so we're going to do that and move the feet over this way, and E hotkey slightly. Basically, I'm just going to put this guy into a position where it seems like he's getting blown away. All right. Let's just take this leg and move it a little bit further away as well. And we'll move his torso a little bit forward like this and rotate it slightly this way and slightly down. And then we'll put the arms further out. And this one as well. Okay, this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to, really go into detail explaining each individual movement here, but we're just kind of putting him into the kind of position where he looks like he's getting blown away. Okay, that's our second keyframe. So now what's happening is here, he's just getting blown to bits over here. And then we're going to have him at frame, we'll go to frame maybe 290, okay? We'll have him land on the ground, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is close down the edit motion layer track. We're going to put him into a relative transform position, pressing the W hotkey again. I'm going to kind of rotate him as well, E hotkey. I'm going to have him kind of just hands and knees on the ground like this. Something like this. Or we can actually have him just like, kind of falling and into a seated position by the car. Okay. Doesn't really matter. I'll just go ahead and work with this one here. There we go. Okay. So at this position, I think our transform position is okay. We're going to make sure that our character, we're going to go to our attributes over here, and I'm going to choose foot contact and hand contact. Okay. Foot contact to make sure his feet aren't going through the cement there. And you can see they kind of twist a little bit like that, a little bit in a weird position. If that happens again, we can just go to the motion layer edit tool and adjust that slightly. So unlock that and use the E hotkey to rotate it so it's just not in a weird position like that. That looks okay. Probably have to put it up actually. There you go. These things can be a little bit picky. All right, that looks okay. And I think the other one should be fine as well. Just slightly rotate it to the side here. Okay. And I'm gonna put his torso forward again, like this. And arms to his side. That should be fine. All right, so once we have these three positions established, just like this, I think that should be okay. Once we have these three positions established, then we have, the ability to modify our animation some more, just kind of falling down like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add some, transition keyframes, transition curves rather, between these frames, and we're also going to slightly adjust the timing as well. So let's go ahead and play it back in real time. I'm just going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit here. Play back. Okay, he's like, ooh. Okay, so obviously not the kind of transition you want. You want it to be a very jerky transition right here. And what we can also do in this case is let's focus on the transition between points 1 and points 2 here. So if we go boom like this, I'm going to click on the keyframes here, the overall keyframes, and I'm just going to go ahead and move those for Zane. Okay, so there's a track for Zane separately where you can move all the separate keyframes at once. Okay, this one track right here, and we can move it to whatever we want. We can make it faster. Okay, so I think we can probably make it to about here, just like that. And 250 will be okay. Okay, so something like this. And obviously right here, he's just kind of like sliding down. It looks a little bit weird. So what we can do, between here and here, and his butt is also going through the car there. We need to change the position of this one as well. So make it a little bit faster. And another thing I want to do here is I want to change this position. I mean, he obviously doesn't land like a pure landing like that. We're going to just kind of twist his position a little bit as he's breaking away, as he's getting away from the car. So Another thing I want to do to add emphasis to this is I'm going to actually just adjust the car slightly. So when he hits the car, which is this frame right here, I'm also going to just load up his track. So this frame right here is where he hits the car, and we're going to just move the car slightly. So I'm just going to double click in the transform track for our car. And then here, we're going to move the car just ever so slightly to the right. So he actually like kind of hits the car and forces it to the side like that, and then back into position. We'll just double click right here. And I'm going to right click that second keyframe, go to my transition curve presets, and we're just going to go ahead and end in a bounce. So what's going to happen is we're going to just click this and move it back to that position rather. There we go. So now we have this. It's a little bit too fast. So we'll just go ahead and move it a little bit further down here. Okay, so you can see here between the second and third keyframes of my car position, we use that end in a bounce. Okay, so if we double click that, you can see kind of ends in a bounce like that. Goes back into position, ends in like a dun, 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 kind of bounce. Okay, so we're going to do a similar thing with Zane's position. Right here, we're going to go ahead and change his transform position ever so slightly, and also his motion key position. So we're between frames 3 and frames 4, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change his position to something a little bit like he just seems like he's been hit by a car. So I'm going to choose Edit Motion Layer tool here, and we're going to add a keyframe in between these two. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and maybe just snap his head and his torso back slightly, just like this, and especially his head, okay, like that. And the arms can be, further up, just like this. We obviously don't want those arms to be in that position, just sliding down. And this is very rudimentary motion key editing, by the way. Just keep that in mind. You could do a lot better than this, but I have limited time here. And let's just go ahead and maybe take the feet as well. We'll move those feet slightly to the side like this. And because maybe the impact with the car has kind of impacted his body a little bit. I'll take this one up as well, just like this. All right, so then we have this, like that. And so, like this. Now, again, the landing is a bit too smooth for my taste, so we can do a very similar, procedure to what we did with the previous one with the transition curve presets with the car. We can do the same thing for Zane's transform position. So let's go ahead to this third transform keyframe here, right-click it, and transition curve presets. And let's do that same one, end in a bounce. Okay. Now, we can make it a little bit further down, just like this, and he'll just kind of land like this. All right. So now it seems like he's kind of landing in a kind of bouncy way like that. Okay. And there we go. So I think everything there looks a-okay. Between here and here, again, we have like that. Okay. It could be obviously tweaked a little bit. Maybe between here, this bounce and this bounce, we could have a little bit of more motion key editing like this. Having his torso, move up a little bit as well, and the arm, just slight, modifications like this. And then we can copy and paste this motion key frame right here, down here. And the more modifications you make like this, or just copy and paste this clip rather. That's the way we're doing it now. Paste. So now the motion key information is all included in these clips. Okay, so you're not going to change the keyframes. You're going to copy and paste the clips instead of the keyframes. This is also a difference between previous versions of iClone and 7.2. Okay, so now what we have is this, like that. And between here and here, his head goes up, and you can maybe even just adjust that even further, make it more exaggerated. There we go. So landing, It's hit, boosh like that, and then poof. Okay, something like that. So what it's going to play back as is something like that. This looks okay. Again, we can change the timing of that and everything, but I'm going to move on to the next part of this webinar, which is adding in the special effects, the fun stuff. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time doing those animation tweaks and stuff because you guys are probably getting bored out of your skulls there. All right, so let's move on to the animation, or rather the popcorn effects, special effects that we're going to throw in here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our main folder under the Set tab, and we have particles. Particles. And we're going to be using a couple of particle effects from a popcorn effects. I think one of them is from the popcorn effects library 40, which is a content pack that you can purchase separately on the content store. And if you want, I can provide a link for that at the end of this webinar. Again, at any point here, I just wanted to mention as well, at any point here, guys, you can put your questions in the Q&A panel at the top there. Don't put anything in the chat window right now. Any questions I'll answer will be in the Q&A panel there, okay? I just saw some people putting in the chat window. The chat window I'm going to use for any sort of links that I put at the end of the webinar. The Q&A panel is the one that I'm going to use to answer questions, okay? So make sure you put your questions in there. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose the Popcorn Effects Library 40, all right? There's a lot of cool stuff in there. I'd really recommend, picking this up. If you're doing any sort of, production, lots of cool stuff in there, magic, weapons, and explosives, highly recommended. I'm going to go to the weapons and explosives folder right here, and we have a very good explosion, this blast one, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this in, go to the frame where my character gets blown away here, and I'm going to throw this in there, the blast, just click and drag that in. Just like that, okay? So that's the position of the initial blast, okay? And then he's going to be, it's going to throw him off balance there, more than off balance. But anyways, what we want to do here is right-click on that and remove object animation, okay? Like I did with the car before, and we want to time this, okay? So if we play back, what's going to happen is it's going to just explode right off the bat. And obviously, we don't want that. We want to time this, okay? We want it to time it. So we're going to go ahead and select Emit Off at the very top here in the Popcorn Effects tab. Okay, so I'm going to select Emit Off, and we're going to time it. So I'm going to play back until hapless old Zane here comes running along, and then at this point here, we're going to start off the explosion. So here's where we want to put Emit On, okay? Right when we want the explosion to take place. So, okay, and then we want to select Emit Off after it's finished, and there you go. We only have one explosion, okay? If we press F3 and go into our timeline, you can see that we have the emit right here, the emit track, and we basically just started it right here, and then this is where the emit is going to end, okay? And the smoke will just gradually clear, and there's Zane off in the distance there. Okay, so fairly simple stuff. Again, we'll just play through that one more time, having Zane just, that's the side, to get blown up by this random explosion. Okay, now another thing we're going to add in there, we're going to add a couple things, some fire and some smoke as well. And if we have time, I might be able to get back to the curve editor if you guys have any questions about that as well. I just kind of did this process with only using transition curves. So what we're also going to do is at this frame here, we're going to throw in like a fire. So there's this burning flame thing, okay, which is really cool. We talk about that in another webinar. There's this torch fire. There's all sorts of various fires you can use. I believe there's one in the learning samples. So once you get the Popcorn Effects plugin, you should get this learning samples pack for free, okay? And there's an applications one. And in applications, there's a texture emitter. I believe the fire one is in here. There's some really cool ones in here, like this flame, there's fire rain. There's fire flies, fire sparks, and all this stuff. Some pretty cool stuff in here. I'm going to be using the fire one in here. The smoke ring. There's a smoke one in here as well, I think. Fog on the ground. We'll worry about that smoke one a little bit later. Anyways, the fire one is what we're going to be using for this example. So I'm going to just click and drag the fire in there, and relatively the same spot. Again, we don't need to worry too much about the exact position. Maybe just press the W hotkey and move it slightly up. There we go. And okay, the fire is emitting. Obviously, very small fire. We need to go over here to our popcorn effects tab, and we're going to choose our emit volume. Change it to about, I think, 100 on the X and 100 on the Y axes right here. And make sure that keyframe right there is at the very beginning of our emit volume. Okay. So there's our fire. I mean, not tremendously large. We can increase that. Now, I wanted to mention, keep in mind that any text that you see in iClone with green, any parameter that you see with green text is going to add keyframes. If you adjust it, it's going to add keyframes to your project. So what I did there is basically at frame 241 here, I'm just having the fire start. Okay. So I'm just going to go to the same thing. We're going to go to frame 1 with the fire selected, with the flame selected rather, emit off, okay, and frame 240, this is where it starts, emit on, okay. And again, there's the emit and attributes. These are the ones we're modifying. So this frame here, I'm just going to go ahead and throw in the volume a little bit larger, maybe to 150, just to make it a little bit different. And you can adjust, the spread, speed ratio, and all this stuff. I don't want to get into too much detail in this webinar on all these different parameters because there's tons of them here. We'll just change our emit rate to something a little bit higher, and we'll just test it out. There you go. Okay, so I think that fire looks okay. All right, we can adjust the emit rate as well if we want. A little bit, maybe the quota should be a bit higher as well. There you go. That's a bit more of a hardy fire. Okay, we'll just work with that. And of course, it looks a little bit strange by itself, so we need to add in some smoke. And I think the smoke can be found also in the learning samples. But I think the smoke is in a it won't be in the functions. Let's try and find some smoke in the library 40. I know there's another one as well, but there's also one in this weapons and explosives here, which is pretty cool. This is a good smoke one right here. This is probably a better fire to use for this situation, this torch fire in the popcorn effects library 40. But I just wanted to show you one in case you didn't purchase the library 40 pack. You can also use that other fire one. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in some smoke. Same position, okay. And at frame 1. Let's go back to frame 1, just choose off for the emit, go to frame 240, and emit on, and play back. And there's our smoke thrown in there as well. I think that smoke can be a lot more intense. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to just go to this frame here, and the smoke opacity, smoke life, you can increase those both slightly. Global scale, if you pump that up, it'll just kind of increase the size of the smoke. The zone, we don't need to worry too much about that. Wind turbulence, all that stuff, we don't need to worry too much about that. Let's just go ahead and throw in a bit more for the zone there. And play that. There you go. So it's a bit, the zone's a bit larger, and again, ideally, we probably could, add a bit more fire in there as well, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm just going to, you can tweak those values on your own time, I guess. And what we're going to do here as well is under props, rather, we go props here. By the way, if you want, you can press Control-1, and you can adjust the view in your content manager here. Control-1. If you want to take a look at different type of view, I'm going to go down here, and there is a should be in this folder here, an explosion, special effects explosion. If I can find it, I believe it should be in here somewhere. Maybe it's not installed on this computer, but there is also another different pack that includes a number of different special effects explosions and stuff like that. And we can deal with that in a separate tutorial, but okay, there we go. We're gonna work with that. And the last thing I want to talk about before we get to our Q&A and stuff is camera movement. We're gonna do a little bit of camera movement and one final special effect as well, using the visuals. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go ahead and select camera movement now. To do that, I need to create a camera. So I'm gonna create a couple of cameras here. Create camera. And the first camera, we're gonna have focus on our character. So I'm gonna select Zane, press the F hotkey, and focus on him. We're gonna have this camera kind of viewing him from the side, okay? We can switch to the side view to the front view. So what I'm gonna do here is, with this camera selected, I'm gonna change the type of camera. So again, if we press the U hotkey, if I have Zane selected and I'm adjusting my camera position, if I press the U hotkey, I can automatically toggle to my last selected camera, which is this one right here, the only camera we have. So U, 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 and you can see in the modify panel, we'll change to the camera properties. Okay, so I want to change this to like 35, or let's do something closer, like 80 millimeter like this. Okay, we want it to seem like a bit more dynamic. So we're trying to get a close up of our character from the side. So we can do even 105 millimeter for focal length there. And let's just press the U hotkey again to Zane. We can move the camera slightly, just like this. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to have it like this and kind of closer to the front right there. Put him in the third of the screen here, the rule of thirds. There's a 1, 2, 3. We'll put him right here in the third section of the screen. And we're going to just go ahead and attach this camera to our character. Okay, so attaching the camera to the character, we can go down here and press the U hotkey again. And I'm going to go down here to link. Okay, we can attach it or link it to it. Doesn't really matter in this case. I'm going to select pick parent, and I'm going to select my character. We selected his pelvis there. Now the problem with this is if we play back, you can see, whoa, holy cow. Basically, it's following his pelvis. And you get some weird, wacky, incredible movement like that. So what we're going to do, instead of attaching it to his pelvis, we're going to move this over here a little bit. We're going to click on this ellipses here, and we're going to change to his character base, okay, which is at the very top, the bone root, okay, and press OK. So once we do that, if we play back, now we're attached to his, basically the base of the character, okay, which is the center of gravity for the character at the very bottom. And I don't want to get too much detail on that, but here we have that, okay. So camera, and we're following the character, very close view, and a very dynamic sort of movement. He's grasping forward, running for his life. One final thing we could do is throw in some depth of field as well with our camera. If we want, we can go to depth of field here and activate that, and we can pick our target and pick our character's head. Okay. And what's happening now is the background sort of blurred, and our character's in the foreground like this. Okay. So pretty cool. And what I'm going to do is at the very end of this camera's view, right about here, I'm going to move the camera slightly over this way. Okay. So what this is going to do is it's basically going to, at the very beginning, you can see that he's kind of ahead of the camera, and closer to the end, he's sort of lagging behind right here. Okay. Just like that. And that kind of sort of creates an effect of, struggling to catch up. He's not running fast enough, sort of a sense of urgency with the camera movement. Okay. And boom, there you go. And then at this point here, we're going to have a separate camera. So I'm going to go at this frame here. We're going to create another camera. And I'll name the first camera like a side follow. Okay. And I'll name this camera just, explosion camera. Explosion. And we're going to, let's move my panel out of the way here. We have an explosion camera currently selected. Okay, so let's go ahead and just move this camera to, whatever frame we want, like this. You can see he's lit up by that explosion already. There's a blue aura around his body. So what we're going to do is use this frame right here, and a little bit closer maybe, just something like this. And explosion camera. Yeah, our focal length, that's fine. We'll choose something maybe like 80, a little bit further away. And we're not going to have depth of field on this particular camera. Okay, so this frame here, we're going to have this camera also attached to our character. So I'm just going to link it to the character just like this. And again, choose the bone root instead. And what's going to happen is poof, like this. I'm going to have this kind of like a sort of overhead view. And another thing I'm going to do is, as we get to this view right here, I'm going to move that camera down to a position where he's like this. Okay, we can barely see him. Okay, so I'm going to press F3 and show you all the crazy things I did to that camera. Okay, so press F3. We're going to select the explosion camera here, and we have all sorts of different crazy things we did at that frame. So let's go to constraint, lens, depth of field. All this stuff doesn't really matter if it's at that frame or not, but I'm going to move it to the very beginning. Okay, so here's this is another kind of interesting camera view as well. At this frame right here, we change to the explosion camera. Let's go ahead and change it to something like this. And just press the U hotkey. And from here to here, what I'm going to do is, let's open up that transform track here. So we have two keyframes. What I'm going to do here is sort of again, that shaky sort of camera movement. Okay? So the way you can do that, again, right-click curve editor, or rather transition curve presets, and you can just do like a stuttering start. Okay, so everything just looks like it's just chaos, like that. And we can throw that a little bit further back. Okay, so that's kind of a cool camera view, I think, right here. And there we go. Okay, so we have that camera. If we want to switch the cameras, we can do so. Maybe about here, I want to switch the camera view like halfway through. This is in the project tab up here. I'm going to go ahead and go to my switcher here. And I'm going to right-click, camera list, explosion. Okay, and at the very beginning, I'm going to right-click, camera list, and side follow. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like. And we're going to change our camera view to switch, just like this. And we have this side view like that, and then that. Okay, so that's one sort of perspective you can have. There's various other cameras you can add. I just kind of want to show those. And at this frame, after he's lying on the ground and the smoke's kind of like, filling the sky and everything like that, we can have him kind of look around. The way I'm going to achieve that is, let's just go ahead and make everything invisible, all our effects visible right now, or rather deactivate them for now. Okay, because we want to actually see our character. So after the explosion, he kind of lands like this, and we can go ahead and have him kind of look around slightly using the real-time direction puppet tool. Okay, so this is a very common use for this. I often use this direction puppet tool for like idles, or if I just want specific movement on a specific body part of the character, like this. So for example, if I select that and I select my character's head, and I choose like a primary rotation like this, I can move my character's head around like this separately. Okay, like looking around like what happened, like that, So a very useful little a technique you can use for that. So I'm going to go ahead and record just 2 seconds of that, like have him look around like this, and whoa. Okay, and then press enter or press space again to stop, and there we go. Okay, that sort of messed up my camera for some reason. Went under the water. Not sure why that happened. Let's check out the explosion camera one more time here. I guess we just need to readjust that transform position. There we go. All right. A little buggy bug there. Okay, so there's, after our character lands, kind of movement like that, and then like, what happened? So let's throw in the blast and activate all those effects again and play it back really quickly here. Okay, and then our character's kind of looking around through the smoke, like whatever. Okay, so that's just another little tip that you can use that directional puppet tool as well. I have maybe a couple minutes to talk about the curve editor slightly. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the part where my character is getting exploded or getting thrown against the car. We're going to change to preview camera here. Okay, so this point right here where he's getting, basically thrown against the car. You guys are probably sick of hearing that explosion by now, but at this frame here, we're going to select our character Z, and we're going to close down all that other stuff. So you can see here's all those keyframes we created. This puppet clip over here, this is the one that I used for that directional puppet tool. Okay, that one created this clip right over here. Now, say for example, I'm going to select Zane, and we're going to just basically go to the plugins up here and curve editor and take a look at that. Let's close down our modify panel. Let's close down all these scene, visual, and content tabs up here. Just a brief overview of basically all the stuff that's happening here. I'm going to shift select all the positions and all the rotations actually for Zane, and we're going to just move our curve editor over here so we can see more of it. So basically here is, let's just focus on the position first. Okay, so the position here on the X and Y axis, if we press the W hotkey, that's the red and the blue axes. Okay, so we only adjusted those two positions. Okay, he's a little bit high up, so that's the blue one is basically his height from the ground. The red one is basically his distance from the original position from here to the right. Okay, so if we, for example, took this keyframe, this blue keyframe here, and raise him up, you can see his height raises correspondingly in the viewport right there. We can adjust the curve of this. Let's just zoom in a little bit here. We can adjust the curve by clicking on this little handle here and adjusting it this way. If we wanted, for example, his height to decrease a little bit as we move along here, so kind of fall down a little bit, we can do that and raise that up even further. So just something like this. He'd fall up before falling down towards the car like that. Okay. And this position here. So this is the this little bounce here. That's the preset that I use. So if I scrub through my timeline here really close, this keyframe here, between this keyframe, this transform keyframe here, and this transform keyframe here, this is the kind of preset that I use. So I right click and transition curve preset. This is the end and a bounce. Okay, so it kind of bounces on the ground just like that. Okay. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and you can right click that and go to curve, and you can sample shown preset curves. What that's going to do is that's going to just basically, every preset that you have is going to separate it into separate keyframes so that you can fully customize those. All right, so if you have a lot of time on your hands and you want to go in there and really customize those curves, you can do that and take each one of these keyframes separately and move it around to whatever you want. I don't recommend it mostly myself, but yeah, to each their own, right? Landing on the ground like that. Okay, and rotation, same thing, just like this. Okay, there you go. So that's basically the rotation. We don't need to worry about that. Just rotated from one side to the next. Okay, I think I'm not gonna blabber on too much about the curve editor. If you have any questions specifically about that, you can ask me in the Q&A. Okay, but I think, yeah, we're going to move now to the Q&A section of this webinar. So any questions, I strongly encourage you to ask me anything you want, and I'll be able to answer that for you right now. So let's go ahead to the Q&A section here. A couple people mentioned there's no audio. That was because we were muted at the beginning of the webinar. Hopefully that everyone figured that out there. Okay, and one says gracias. We do not have Spanish webinars right now, but we may have Spanish tutorials in the future. There's a number of different of our users that actually have Spanish tutorials on YouTube. You can just search for like, iClone Spanish tutorials. There's a lot of Spanish tutorials, especially from South America. I think that our users are putting on YouTube now. We don't have any official Reallusion ones, but tons of them on YouTube. Joel asks a good question. Couldn't you just turn on physics or something after your character is blown away and have a ragdoll collapse? Yes, you could. Technically, that requires a ragdoll prop, I guess. Your character can be applied with physics. So let's see here. Once a character is selected here, I'm just going to show you quickly. You can see there's no physics on the character, so the character can't be applied with physics itself. But technically what you could do is you could, if you want to be creative, you could save your character as a prop. And this is, I've seen this in the past, people do this. You can save your character as a prop and you can apply physics to that character. Okay, so for example, see when I click on the car, we have this option for physics up here, right? When I click on the character, that options for physics is not there. But like I mentioned, you can save your character in 3D Exchange as a prop, and you can apply physics to it like this. So, one thing I could do is I could attach a physics dummy to my character's chest, and I could have that physics dummy, when it hits the physics car, it could move the car in a more realistic way, okay? And that would, just involve attaching a physics dummy to my character's chest, applying it with, dynamic physics, and putting a static physics mesh on the car. But as far as the character collapsing onto the ground, yeah, you could do that. And the way you would do that is at the point the character impacts the car, you would make the character disappear and you would align the prop character exactly with where the character was. And you just kind of, in the same frame, make the avatar invisible, and you would make the prop character, or make the avatar character invisible and make the prop character visible with the physics applied, and see where it goes from there. So that could be a fun experiment, for future webinars, or I don't really have time to get into it in this particular webinar, but physics are fun. A lot of cool stuff you can do with physics. Hopefully that answers your question there, Joel. It's all speculation at this point. I've never actually tried that, but I have tried very similar scenarios, and they've worked in the past. Okay, with the props character applied with physics and all that stuff. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question there. Jonathan asks, when creating sprite sheets with external software, what size do you recommend to use for popcorn effects? Oh gosh, Jonathan, I don't know a lot about the popcorn effects editor. I've only used it basically for when I was training on popcorn effects. I didn't actually create anything myself. What I would recommend doing is probably for that question, checking out the popcorn effects site. I don't have the answer for that. We do have like developers, the people that created the library 40 pack, for example, that may be able to answer that question. So if you emailed me that question, I could forward that to them and ask them if they have a recommended sprite sheet, size rather. But yeah, probably your best bet is to go to the popcorn effects site on the forum there, and they would be able to recommend it to you. Or in the popcorn effects editor, just go to the help file, because I can't really give you any answer on that, because I'm kind of a popcorn effects dummy when it comes to creating my own effects there. So Apologies for that, Jonathan. I can't really answer that in detail. Kevin has a question. When would you use physics? I think I talked a little bit about physics, enough about physics with the previous question. I mean, you can use character physics with the character, physics with the car, physics with all kinds of things. And physics, like I mentioned, it's really fun, but very time consuming to get physics right in a lot of cases. And I find that physics changes based on the computer you're using, based on the processor power. You know, I've taken a project from one computer to another with different processing power, and the physics presets that I had saved have reacted differently. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that question there, Kevin. Any specific question you want to ask about physics, feel free to do that. Anthony asks, when will we be able to download the new Character Creator pipeline? So I assume you're talking about Character Creator 3, which is the new version of Character Creator coming out. That is, I believe, end of this month, although don't quote me on that. We do often have, week-long delays on releases. We want to get it perfect before we send it out to you guys. So yeah, not sure when the official download date will be because it's currently a work in progress. Okay, we're just refining some final things, getting the last bells and whistles prepared, and yeah, I can't give you a specific answer on that. So sorry about that, Anthony. Luciano asks, is it possible to import Daz characters into Character Creator 2 or 3 or only to iClone? Yes, you can import Daz characters into Character Creator 3. Okay, so that's one of the cool new features with Character Creator 3. Basically, you can import a Daz character directly into Character Creator 3, and it will adopt the Character Creator rig. So you'll have the Daz mesh and all the meshes and everything, all the blend shapes, everything will be intact, but you'll also be able to use the Character Creator 3. Basically what it'll do is it'll convert it from a Daz character into a Character Creator 3 character, but it'll appear the same. And you'll have use of all the iClone tools, all the the iRay rendering and all that stuff in Character Creator 3, and the clothing conform. So for example, a cool little feature with that is when you take it, if you have a Daz character, like Genesis 8 Victoria, for example, we'll say, and you bring her into Character Creator 3, you can use our Character Creator morphs to make her like fat or thin or change her body shape. And the clothing that she came in with from Daz will actually conform to that body shape. Okay, so the skinning data for the clothing will also be intact. You can do automatic skinning for your clothing on your Daz character when you bring it into iClone. And not only that, you can save that clothing and apply it to other iClone characters as well. Lots of cool stuff you can do. But yes, importing Daz characters into Character Creator 3, no problem. Okay, so Ken asks, any chance Relusion would add support for 3D mice? Ooh, I don't know at the moment. I haven't heard anything about it, Ken. So apologies for that. I can't really comment on 3D mice support at the moment. But yeah, stay tuned for that. It could be something coming in the future. But I don't think we have enough demand for it at this point. If you want to, just email us, and we'll, the more demand we get for a feature, or put it in the forums. The more demand we get for a feature, the more likely we are to add it. Luciano also asks, does iClone create water and wind simulation? There is wind simulation, yeah, for the stuff like the speed trees. That's what I'm talking about, speed tree. The speed tree has wind simulation. Water simulation, not currently. That's fairly high resource. That it's hard to do real-time water simulation, but we may have it in the future. I'm trying to think, is that something that's... I can't comment on water, but I know wind simulation is there already. Okay, so Warren asks, can the texture of the explosion be changed like water, like a water balloon explosion splash. Yeah, basically anything from these popcorn effects can be changed. For example, the blast itself, go to the popcorn effects tab, there's a color, okay? And there's also this distortion map down here, okay, the sparks. So this is the diffuse map. So basically what you would do is you would launch this into Photoshop, the diffuse map for that explosion, and you could just change it to like, you know, water splashes or something. Adjust all of these things here to like, this one would not be fire, obviously. It would be water instead, and this would be kind of blue. These would be kind of cloudy blue. So it's basically using this sprite sheet. Oops. Let's see here. Control Alt I. So to answer the previous question, I guess this sprite sheet is 512 by 512. I'm not sure if that's the recommended amount, recommended size, but 512 by 512 for this sprite sheet. It depends on how many sprites you have, I guess. But yeah, that's for that. Who was that asked that question? Warren. Yeah, Warren. That's the way you would modify it using the particle sprite sheet here, and the distortion could probably remain the same. And you would probably change the dust tint to blue from black. Explosion color could be you know, blue. It would take a bit of experimentation, but you can definitely customize that. Okay, so Luciano also asks, is it possible to export VFX explosions as Alembic format? Oh, I've never tried that, to be honest. As far as I know at this point, the popcorn effects explosions and stuff are to be used mainly in iClone. They're not meant to be exported at this point. We may have that function available in the future because they're not really physics. We may have that function available in the future, but we can export, you know, as you probably know, we can export soft cloth and clothing and stuff like that in Alembic format, you know, hair. It's been animated with physics. All that can be animated or exported rather in Alembic format. But as for the VFX, I don't believe so. As far as I know, it's meant to be used only with an iClone at this point. Okay, so apologies for that, Luciano. Edith asks, is this scene available now for iClone 7? If you guys want, I can send this this scene out to whoever needs it. You can just email me, kai@reallusion.com, and I'll be able to send this scene out to you guys. You may, since I used some of the popcorn effects, excuse me, from the library 40, if you don't have the library 40, then you may experience a watermark. In addition, I use the curve editor slightly. If you don't have the curve editor plugin, you may experience a watermark. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question there, Edith. Any more specific, just feel free to put another question there. Lorraine asks, how do you change hair color? All right. Let's change the hair color on our character. Very easy stuff. Let's press the J hotkey to focus on his head. That's the J hotkey. You can go over to material, and every character has a base color map for their hair. You can adjust that base color map if you want by using this adjust color panel. We can change the hue to green and brightness. Oh, no, we're selecting not his hair, we're selecting something else. Probably his pants. Yep. There we go. We darkened his pants there. All right, so same thing with the hair. We need to make sure that we have the hair material selected. There we go. The scalp or the faux hawk hair. Give him some like slightly white hair. We aged him in like 2 seconds there. Throw up the saturation there. Give him some green, funky purple hair. All right, that's one way you can do it. Adjusting the hair color. The Super Saiyan hair. Anyways, you can have fun with that on your own time. That's just how you adjust the hair. You can double click any of these parameters, by the way, to return them back to normal. Okay. Black here. All right. Anyways, that's how you can change the hair color. That's one way. There's many different ways you can do it, to be honest. That's probably the easiest way. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and give that as my basic answer for changing hair color. Law asks, where do we find a keyboard shortcut list? I'll show you that. You can go to Help, Online Manual, and there should be at the very last, Chrome update or something? The very last keyboard shortcuts table down here, basically. There's global shortcuts, shortcuts and panels, and timeline shortcuts, right? So those are all the hotkeys, basically. All right, just go to the help file. Toby asks, are the transitions, linear, etc., the same in the curve editor? In the curve editor, you have full control over any transition. You can add in keyframes, you can remove keyframes. The default, like I mentioned, the default transitions are currently ease in and ease out, no longer linear. So if you have a more specific question, I'm not really sure, maybe you can clarify what you meant by that question there, Toby. I'll answer that. So Karen asks, will you ever do a webinar on how to pan a scene? We have a pretty good tutorial on camera movements. It's a pretty decent tutorial that I did a long time ago, way back in the day. Our YouTube channel. iClone camera movement, basically. Just type in iClone camera. I'll throw this in the chat window. It's a fairly old tutorial, but you know the basics are still there. Beginner's guide, basic camera work. This talks about it's like a fairly dramatic scene. I'll just copy that, throw it in the chat window there for you guys. Okay, if you want to check that out on your own time. Quick, it's not really quick. It's actually about half an hour tutorial on camera work. We used to do long tutorials back in the day. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question there for you. We may do, I don't think we can do a whole webinar exclusively on panning, but maybe on camera movement for someone who's more well-versed on camera movement than I am. So Tony mentions here, to minimize the jerkiness when rendering a scene, should you render in real time or by frame? Tony, when you're rendering the frame, when you're rendering the scene, if you select real time or by frame, when you're rendering, it doesn't matter. That's only for playback, really. The by frame playback is used for physics. If you want more accurate physics results, I'd recommend using by frame playback when you play back to record, the physics results. But as far as render smoothness, that real time or by frame mode, it doesn't really affect the final render. That would be probably camera movement or various other movements in your scene. In case you guys are wondering what Tony's talking about there, we have this real time and by frame mode here at the bottom. If you have physics in your scene, I recommend using by frame mode when you play back to record your physics results, because that does a little bit slower, it uses a little bit more processing power to have more accurate physics results. All right. Jack asks about stereoscopic cameras. We do have stereoscopic renders, or render video. There's this enable stereo vision output here at the bottom. Okay, so there's anaglyph, there's side by side, above below, dual stream, all these stereoscopic sort of camera outputs. Okay, when you do the final render, this is the way it is. Okay, and let me just move this out of the way there. There we go. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. I don't believe in the camera that there's any parameters for. I haven't done any sort of stereoscopic stuff for years. but as far as I know, it's not in the camera settings anywhere. Just in the final render, as far as I know. All right. So hopefully I answered your question there, Lorraine, about changing the hair color. So Jonathan asks, will multi-limb characters created from Daz Carrera also be able to be imported into Character Creator 3? Now this creates a problem. Multi-limb characters like Goro from Mortal Kombat, or like, I don't know who else, like Vishnu or something, who has like multiple arms. Unfortunately, we only support currently 2-arms characters. So when you import those 3-arm characters, you'll come across some issues. Right now, the conversion pipeline is only for 2-armed characters, unfortunately. So we may, I just think that there just hasn't been enough demand for multi-armed characters in the past. But if there is enough demand, then at some point we'll probably add in support for multi-limb characters. Okay. Yeah, Jose has a good comment here. What do you think about Reallusion investing in 3D VR export? Not only 360 video, but also real VR. Seems like these would be great in VR glasses. Yeah, we do have a lot of people, that basically they do VR renders. In terms of real VR, that's something that it seems to be an increasing trend. Well, it's obviously an increasing trend, real VR. So that's probably something that we're going to look towards in newer versions. As far as I know, it's not in the 7.3 scenario in the future for that, but you could probably see that in the future in iClone if that becomes a stronger trend. But I can't really answer on that. But I think it is a great idea. And Jose, I'd recommend, in our forums, we have a suggested feature section in our forums that our development team is always browsing. So if you have any sort of, comment on that, put it in that section in the forum. Again, forum.reallusion.com is our forums. We have suggested or wishful features section that you can throw that in there. And we do browse that daily, so that's where you can get your feedback. Okay, so okay, question from Guy involving Toon Shader. Are there any plans to improve the line quality to more of a sculpted shape? Guy, as far as I know, Toon Shader, there's no immediate plans for any modifications to the Toon Shader, any immediate improvements. But again, if that's something that you're looking for, yeah, put that in the wishful feature section of the forum. But I can't really comment on that. I haven't heard anything about the Toon Shader in a couple of years, so apologies for that, Guy. Anthony says, will you ever do a webinar on Character Creator Marketplace submission? Yes, Anthony, this is something that we've had actually requested from a number of different people, how to submit to the marketplace. In case any of you are not aware, we have a marketplace where you can sell your own assets to our Reallusion users. Marketplace.reallusion.com, right here. Yeah, I'll throw this in the chat window as well. There we go. Okay, so go to that marketplace.reallusion.com, and there's a lot of, you can basically publish and sell your own stuff there. We don't really curate the marketplace at all. We don't do any quality assurance there, but we do recommend starting out there. For any like exceptional quality content that we find, we do often publish that in the content store. But the marketplace is where you can just publish basically whatever you want. Just no obscene content or nudity and stuff like that. You should be good to go. All right. Yeah, but Anthony, we will definitely have tutorials on that in the future. That's something that we're looking towards. Any suggestions? Robert asked one final question here. Any suggestions to speed up final render while maintaining high quality. I use 360 panorama video for VR. Oh, in your render settings, yeah, I'm not a huge expert on render settings here. And again, we don't really have many. But yeah, there's high quality depth of field, super sampling. This is one thing. If you have it on, it may slow down your render a little bit. But aside from that, I think everything's fairly basic. Yeah, just make sure the better video card, I guess, is really the only answer I have for you there. Sorry for that, Robert. Okay, we've got a couple more questions here, it looks like. Jody asks, what about motion capture with iPhone 10? Body and face, is that coming? Yes, we currently have facial motion capture with the iPhone 10. It's called the Face Live plugin. In case you guys are not aware, Motion Live, iClone. We have a Motion Live site. I'll throw this in the chat window as well. Whoops. There we go. The Motion Live website talks all about the different gears. So under gear, there's iPhone 10 Live Face. You can click on that. And this has all the information you need to know about the iPhone 10 facial capture. We will have a webinar on the where I'm going to be using this actually next week. I'm going to have a webinar based on this and also using the Faceware facial capture. So we're going to use Faceware and iPhone 10 for facial capture. And again, that'll be next week. So make sure you add that onto your schedule if you want to learn more about that. That answers that question for you there. So Jose asks a related question: is there plans for that on the Android? Possibly. Right now, the only reason we have it exclusively with iClone is because we're using iClone or iPhone. We're using Apple's proprietary technology, their proprietary facial capture. What do they call those? Animojis. So they use that same technology to animate the animojis. If you have an iPhone 10, you probably know what I'm talking about. You have a little cartoon character that you can drive their facial capture and create your own little animation on your iPhone. Okay, but for Android, they haven't come out with that yet. So until they do, we won't have anything on that. In the camera modify, there's a section film back. I only use full frame. Tony asks the camera modify section. I'm not sure. Anyway, this film back here. Okay, so yeah, the film back is a bunch of different presets. Okay, so you have certain presets, and these are industry standard presets. Okay, you can choose these full frame. You know, any one of these. These are all just different presets. And you can export your cameras to FBX as well, using it into Maya. You can also import cameras and whatnot. Okay, so I'm not sure what the specific question is there. We don't really have any tutorials on this film back settings yet, but I think we may have that in the future. But yeah, these are just know that these are industry standard presets. And what we basically wanted to harmonize with the rest of the industry, you know, because people have said like, oh, I did this, you know, project in Maya, or I did this in Maya, and then I brought it into iClone, and the camera's all wacky because your cameras are not, you know, one-to-one with the industry standards. So we just basically added this to shut everyone up, you know. So now we have the industry standard presets all set up here. But that's a good idea for tutorial. So film back, let me just write that down. That's an interesting idea for tutorial because we don't have anything on that since that's a new feature with 7.2, I believe. But we may have tutorials on that in the future. All right, thanks, Mark. Hopefully you enjoyed the webinar. And thanks, John, Freddie, Ocampo, Balez. And I think that's all the questions. All right, so we're going to go ahead and basically end off the webinar there. If you have any questions, again, you can email me, kai@reallusion.com. And again, make sure you fill that survey we're going to send out to you guys. You get a 10% discount from the content store, and we are going to have this on a video format. We're going to send you the link as well. And yeah, I think that's about it. So thanks so much for attending, everyone. Make sure you take a look at our webinar next week, focused on facial mocap using the Faceware and iClone 10 hardware. And we'll learn more about doing facial animation, editing facial animation, and the various aspects of both of those. Okay, so I think that's about it. Again, thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Really appreciate it. Any feedback, make sure you put into that survey form, and I'll see you in the next webinar.